Alright, so today we're going to be looking at doing a rental prospector just to see if it's viable out in the belt. As you can see, I'm going through here renting it. It's about 73K. You'll easily make that back within a couple of runs. Once you actually rent it, you'll need to come to the kiosk, the ASOP terminal, however you want to describe it. You'll have to deliver it and then retrieve it to be able to use it. You can tell it's rented by the actual rented in the bottom left of the actual entry.
Your vehicle has been delivered to the please visit us again.
So I'm actually based out of ArcL2, so it's actually going to take us a few minutes, so don't be surprised if you see some jumping in the video. It's likely going to go from ArcL2, possibly to ArcL1, might even just skip it all the way to where we're in the belt. Obviously, being a rented prospector, we only have an arbor on here. Now, the one change I have made, since you can't change the ship, is I've actually picked up a Sabir gadget. This is actually just to help reduce the resistance, which is a big factor of using the arbor. That's usually what stops you from cracking anything bigger than a couple thousand RS signature or mass. So we'll get the ship powered up here and ready to go and get out of the hangar. I figure most of you are probably just here to see whether it can be done, so future videos I may just go ahead and cut out leaving the hangar and jumping. Just start out in the belt. But this one I felt it was necessary to show renting it and retrieving it and so forth. And a lot of people will actually tell you to go to selling because that's actually got better possibilities for prospector mining since the overall mass of the rocks is typically lower. However, you also have to deal with any players who want to hang around the planet. Being that they know that prospectors go there a lot, it can be a hot spot depending on the server. And as we continue into 3.23.2, 4.0, so forth, especially if they get server meshing, piracy is probably going to pick up quite a bit. So what I'm looking at here is the RS signatures. Haven't really found too much of a correlation between size of the asteroid. However, multiples, so larger RS signatures, so say like 3,000 range, so forth, will be multiple rocks, multiple asteroids, however you want to look at it. Multiples of 2,000 will be salvage, so that doesn't really do us any good in a prospector. I haven't really seen too much in the way of gems lately in the asteroid. They used to pop up, but I haven't really seen them at all so far. Used to be, I think 1920 would show because it's multiples of 600 and something, but I haven't found that to be the case lately. As you've seen, I've already covered doing this in the belt, but it works the same way in the prospector. You basically ping until you get within about 3K, and then you stop pinging until you get under 1, and you look for the motion of the rocks and the arrow and so forth. Alright, so here we're actually at a pretty small rock. But just to start out, we'll go ahead and pop this one and collect it. Now, the thing to keep in mind with the arbor, because it is lower power, it actually increases resistance as well. You'll need to take some time. It's not going to be fast, and you're not going to crack 12, 14K rocks. It's just not going to happen. But that's the trade off for using a rented prospector if you don't have your own. When I'm actually doing this, a lot of times, depending on how picky I'm being, I usually won't pick anything up above like below like 30% of the tier 1 materials. And if I'm really picky that day, I won't even pick anything up below like 50. That's just to basically try to maximize and um, maximize the ratio of value ore compared to like inert and low value ores. Typical goal is you want to have more tier 1 ores, which would be, well, quantanium obviously, which you're probably not doing much in a prospector, but bexylite, taronite, and gold. If you do come across borate, that's a good one to grab as well. It actually has a really good break ratio, so you usually get higher percentage of rocks out of it that have just straight borate or very high quality quantities of it. For the purposes of this first run, I'll probably just go ahead and grab stuff. Just so we can show, because when you first start out in a rented prospector, like the first run or two, you're just looking to make your money back. And then after the first run, then I'll start getting a little pickier. Alright, so we've gone and grabbed all those fragments. We'll go ahead and start looking for the next out or patch. Another thing I'll do is I'll try to go for close ones, whatever's closest. You see that one off to the right there was 10,000. That was definitely salvage. I'll usually try to go for what's closer, unless I happen to find a patch that are multiple rocks. Another thing I try to do is I run around in SCM rather than nav mode. Just gives me a little better control. With the size of the little arrows or carrots, you can easily blow by a patch. See how that rock's coming up? You can see it getting closer. That's one of your telltale signs of where you need to be. $31K. I guess we're not cracking that. Shame too. That would be a mole rock, preferably with a full crew. You look at 47%, 145 possible SCU. So you're looking at what, probably about 60 SCU. Again, same method. Go for what's closest. It may or may not be a rock, and then you go to the next closest after that if it's not something you can get. In a rented prospector, quantity is by far better than quality. especially initially when you need to pay off that rental. You figure if you buy the Saber and you rent the Prospector, you're probably right around the tune of about 85, 90K altogether. And you should be averaging somewhere between about 70 to 95, 100K per run with the rented Prospector. Obviously, that increases when you have your own because you can outfit it better. Here, I'm just looking to see if this will even move it. As you can see, it's pretty high resistance, and at 10K, the arbor is just not going to do it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a gadget on it. Another thing you got to keep in mind is since about 319, 321, the actual makeup of the rocks, particularly the core base element like copper, iron, corundum, so forth, also plays a big factor in whether or not you can actually even move the gauge. I found to be with a Hofstede and even with the arbor, aluminum can be pretty tough to crack. So setting up the gadget, you got to put it on your back and then use the utility button, which is usually 5 unless you changed it. That'll put it in your hands, and then you'll hit F, hold F and right click. That'll bring up the menu to place it. As there's a bug right now where just left clicking to place it isn't working. And then you just got to play with these sliders until you get to 90% or higher. New EVA has definitely made this a lot more difficult. As you notice, it's real jittery. You kind of waver and move around a lot. We're used to be rock steady trying to set these up. And obviously, if you're on the ground on a moon, it'd be easier too. But basically, it's just a combination of constantly adjusting one slider at a time, try to get the highest you can, and then move to another slider, and so forth. There we go. All right, back to the Prospector. Let's see if we can crack this. Usually, if you haven't seen at least a little bit of what they call turtling, where it just kind of pops up on the bottom of the charge bar, you're probably not getting anywhere. Same principles apply with the arbor as anything else. You're looking for the highest spark or the most amount of sparks. And that's pretty usually going to be the place. Sometimes you can move around. Sometimes you can even turn the laser off and back on. Maybe that'll help. But in this particular case, this is kind of past the extent of what the arbor can handle, even with the Saber. But we gave it a go. Not really worried about picking up a greasium anyway. that's not up there. Installing the gadget is kind of the reverse of installing it. Turn it off. Hit the button to detach it. There's actually a bug right now if you leave it on your backpack. So your best bet is to take it off your backpack and put it back in your backpack. See what I did there? If it's not actually triggering where you can actually highlight stuff, just move something in your inventory and that'll usually straighten it out. For those of you who have seen my any other videos, you might have heard some of this already, but you never know when a new player is going to get a hold of a video. So I like to kind of point out some of these tips just so that they know. All right, we'll move on to the next rock. Oh, that looks promising. Just double check here. So 3,000 plus it is. That's going to be multiple rocks, probably 2. Notice I didn't keep pinging, so it kind of disappeared and moved when I brought it back up. There's going to be one time where you don't do the closest next batch of rock. It's when it's multiple rocks. See, again, you can see the rocks coming at us. You ping, the little carrots pop up. And as you get closer, the little mining symbols will pop up. So we got 2 rocks here. You can't really go by how they look. I've actually seen some rocks that look smaller than others, and they end up being significantly bigger. So 21K, we're not going to be able to break. That one's a little closer. And we got gold with copper. So this might be something feasible, especially with the saber. I always give it a first try without the saber just because you never know. And as you can see, we're not really moving much. I mean, a little bit, but we'll see if it continues. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Mining is a patience game. If you're not a person with a little bit of patience, you're probably not going to like it. Between finding the rocks and taking the time to break them. So here we're just going to go ahead and put the saber on again. See what we can do with it. Always make sure you put it on the side or the back. That way it's out of the way of the laser. Saber is reusable, but if you hit it with that mining laser, you're not using it anymore. And considering gadgets can run anywhere from 10 or 12,000 up to, I don't know, I think the most expensive one is like 20 or 30. I think they've changed a lot. And we play the slider game. Sometimes it's fast, like that. Sometimes it's slow. And now that we got the saber in place, we'll go ahead and try to break it again.
Mining mode on. Fracturing mode on.
8K rock or so, we're definitely jacking that power up. See, right now I'm not at the very closest point of the optimal zone. Sometimes you can get a little more power out of it doing that. It's another change I believe they made in 319, where you can actually control the power a little bit to some extent by your distance from the rock. And of course, that red zone means danger, Will Robinson. And again, with the arbor, cracking the rocks is probably not going to be fast at this level. If you're looking at 5, 6K, yes. If you're 8K, 9K, possibly even 10 if you get lucky, it's not going to be quick. Realistically, with a rented prospector, you're probably not going to make 200K an hour, but you might be able to make 100K an hour, depending on your luck and your abilities with it. Which, I mean, you get it for 24 hours, even if you count sleep and everything else, figure you get at least 4 or 5 hours out of it. Minimum out of that rental. I mean, that's, easily 4 to 500K. Cost you 90 for the Saber, which is reusable, and the Prospector. So you're still looking at, 3, 400K. Really, when you're doing a rented prospector, your priority should probably be make as much as possible, as fast as possible, so that you can save up to get your own prospector, and then you can get into that 250 an hour plus range. Once you get up into the green, basically it's just the power game. Keep it within that green without going too high. Get into the red, back off. Let it come back down if you can. Alright, first step first, let's go grab our saber. Usually you can see a little bit of flashing maybe after you break the rock, but sometimes you'll just have to go out and look for it. Obviously, the closer you get to the asteroid, even the broken one, the faster you'll be able to find it. So in this particular case, I can see it right there. They actually used to blink a lot brighter. Used to be a whole lot easier to find in space. All right. Hit R to store it, then pull it off your back and put it in your backpack. Always store it in your backpack. After you get some bank built up, you can even carry a spare or two in your prospector. If it's a rental, just make sure you take it out whenever you store, just in case you don't get back to using it.
Fracturing mode on. Mining mode on. Extraction mode on.
Let's see. Decent sized rock, decent amount of gold. Not special, but not too bad. With gold, I usually get an occasional, like, high percentage, but it's not usually crazy. But when you see like 40, 50% and higher, just go ahead and grab it. And again, in an arbor, you're not dealing with huge rocks usually, so. Unless you're finishing your run, I wouldn't bother with any trace amounts like 5, 6, 10%. And like I said, this is the first run I'm doing with this rented prospector, so I'm just kind of grabbing stuff. Usually I'd kind of, stick to 30% and above. And through the magic of video, we're back at the station. So go in here. I think I'll probably remove the parts where I'm refueling, repairing, and so forth. Probably most of the hangar we're in, and elevators and all that. Now, one thing I will say is you should probably store your prospector every time you come back. Just get in the habit of doing it, particularly when you get to the point where you can do Quantanium, since it has a timer, obviously. And also just the fact that if the server crashes and you've stored your ship, then everything's safe. 30k protection works great. And even this new server recovery is working pretty decent, even if it does take a while. But if you're not in your ship, you may still have to claim it. So first priority when landing is always store it. And when you have Quantanium, don't even bother refueling or repairing until after you've stored it and processed the ore. Alright, so since this is the first in the rented prospector, we'll go ahead and show it storing. And then off to the refinery. You do any kind of mining gameplay, you're going to get real familiar with refineries. First, I'll show you the ore sales. You can actually do this without refining, which is immediate cash, but it's about half the value of refining. So as you can see here, we'd be getting about 31.5K, but they also buy everything, including inert material. But this is where the money's at. So begin. All right, so you either want ferron exchange or denic salvation. When I'm doing this, I usually only refine the ores that are tier 1, sometimes 2 tiered. I don't do any of the like copper, iron, any of that stuff. All right, so now that we've got that done, you can see the ore, it's in there. It's already processing. And then here's where I actually use Regolith. I'll put a link in the description for the video. I can't recommend it enough. You go in here and put your information in, and it'll show you how much you're going to make.